So, Anna, Anna, please. Are you hear me? Yeah, it's okay. Okay. So, good afternoon, and welcome to the Portugal Pavilion. So, we will start uh, in a minute this event organized by Common Home of Humanity with institutional partnership CPLP, the Portuguese language countries. And the name of the event is Cleaning Up is Part of the Solution. 10 Reasons for Paris+10. For this panel, I will be the moderator. I'm George Cristino, and I will invite our speakers already to sit. And first, Maria Espinosa Gracias. He is Executive Director of GWL Voices for Change and Inclusion, President on the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly. Please take the seat, the first seat, please. And a round of applause. Anna, can you put louder, please? Okay. It's better? Yeah, okay. So I'll invite also Paulo Magalhães, Common Home of Humanity, Portugal. It's our Executive Director. Yes, in that seat. Now this one. Give the sofas to the ladies, please. So Maya Grove is international lawyer and governor of Climate Governance Commission. And Tiago Pita e Cunha, Executive Director of Ocean Nation Portugal. Least but not the least, the last but not the least, Joshua Lincoln, Fletcher School Center of the International Law and Governance, Board also of the Global Governance Forum. So in this session, we'll have a first step, a first intervention for each panelist. But before that, I would like to present the 10 reasons of Paris+10. That is one of the proposal of Common Home of Humanity that Paulo also will present first. And the first one is there is an urgent need to clean up the atmosphere and the oceans. The second one, cleaning up means removing CO2 without creating more emissions. The third one, not cleaning up is more expensive and dangerous. Fourth, cleaning up is creating wealth. Cleaning up an asset that belongs to everyone. And cleaning up, the sixth one, is an opportunity for justice. 7, cleaning up is making collective action possible. 8, cleaning up using new financial instruments. And 9, cleaning up is building peace. And the last 10, cleaning up is hope. So with this framework, I would like to invite Paulo Magalhães, that is a jurist, a researcher and an environment activist who became an academic because he soon realized that it is as serious to act without theory as it is to make theory without acting. Paulo is a jurist and researcher in the Center of Legal Research of the University of Oporto and is the executive director of the Common Home of Humanity, an international association that proposed a new global legal construction based on new knowledge about the functioning of the Earth system. In 2007, he published The Condominium of Earth, From Climate Change to a New Legal Conception of the Planet, and in 2016, he is co-author of the book COS Treaty, The Safe Operating System Space Treaty, a new approach to managing our use of the Earth system. Paulo, I will invite to the floor to take your first intervention.
Thank you so much. So people ask me why the name of this presentation, of this event, is cleaning up. Hopefully I will be able to explain. Where is my presentation? Okay. Let's start from the beginning. As you can thought, when climate change arrived to United Nations, the first question was, what is climate from a legal point of view? If we cannot divide climate is all over the planet. And the first proposal that took place in 1988 in September was to consider climate as a common heritage of mankind. The climate system itself as intangible common heritage of mankind. But the decision was not to consider climate as a common good, but rather to consider climate change as a common concern. And there is a big difference between one and another option. The main question is, what is a common concern of mankind? Nobody knows very well what is a common concern from a legal point of view in terms of rights and duties. It was the proper father of the concept of common concern of mankind that say that this concept must elaborate and become clear, that must be translated in terms of rights and duties. And because if we do not make this will remain a vague political formula. And today, the legal framework for climate change is to be a common concern. The question is, how it's possible to give rights and duties if the common good itself, climate, is not recognized by the law? And fortunately, in the Convention of 1992, the goal is not to control the total emissions of CO2, but rather to have in mind to control the total concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. This makes a total different approach from what we have today in Paris Agreement. In the UN Convention of 1992, the climate and define also the reservoir. This means if that climate is a common heritage, that's something that only in 2022 in the International Law Commission was accepted, that we must distinguish the special static territory conception from the system, from the functional aspect. This report of 1992 makes the difference between airspace and atmosphere. The same thing we can say about the territorial waters and the circulation of oceans and the biocomposition of the oceans. Two different things. This planet is not only a territory, it has a system that is not recognized by the law. The system is common, is intangible, but we need to decide that one thing is the planet, another thing is the software. The software is common, is intangible, is the base of life, does not respect boundaries, and does not exist for the law. And this makes a lot of difference in the way how we achieve, how we fight climate change. And today we can define the well-functioning state of this software, using the planetary boundaries that are not only CO2, but 9 boundaries, including biodiversity, including ozone, including azote. They define a safe operating space for humankind, and this space is not a territorial space, it's a qualitative space. If we consider this space as a common good that belongs to all humanity, the oceans and the atmosphere will not be a dump as they are today. And the question, a fundamental question for the lawyers and for the jurists is to whom belongs this? Without belonging to anyone, the things are a no man's land. It's a dump. So how can a good that belongs to no one to be subject to a legal regime? it's impossible, because when the father of common consent said we have to translate this in terms of rights and duties, the question is, if the good itself, the system, belongs to no one, if I make a positive act on the system, I have nobody have the duty to compensate me, and I have no rights to be compensated by the others. So the first step to organize the common good is to define the common, to define to who belongs, and after we can start to clean, we can start to have a regulation. And the reservoir that the Commission of Rio talks about, we have this situation where we are now in Paris Agreement, we are only work with flows. What is behind belongs to no one, the stock. We have already outside the limits of safety, and nobody take care about cleaning what belongs to no one. And now we have already technologies to capture CO2 that, because this belongs to no one, are not cleaning what is behind. They are giving rights to new emissions in the carbon market, and this is impossible to clean because it's too clean in a legal void. This stock, the reservoir, the system must belong to someone, cannot be a wasteland. And one thing, if we are behind the limits of safety, we can only work with flows. If we are already outside the limits of safety, we need to work simultaneously and in the stock. Because this is what we have now. Paris Agreement only talks about flows. We're making one emission, we can capture, I have one credit that I do not use, I sell to the other, sum game, or a neutral sum game. We need to make here a positive sum game. We need to go to the stock and start to cleaning something that belongs to no one. And we can use the Rio Convention to start this process. The problem is that the Rio Convention defines climate system, defines the reservoir, but do not define to whom belongs this. It belongs to no one. So we need a counting system for the flows and a counting system for the stock. And this is what is happening now. We have already technologies to remove CO2 that are being used to keep the fossil fuel industry working. There are projects that are foreseen to be closed, that will not be closed, because now we have a technology to capture the CO2 that is emitted by this technology. So we need to have a legal solution to start to clean, in addition, not instead of reducing emissions. So what we are proposing is that after the COP30, we not only work on flows as the first 10 years of Paris Agreement, but we start to work also cleaning what is behind between 25 and 35. So this is the project we are proposing. This is the reason why we want that climate become a common heritage of mankind. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Now we'll call Maya Grove. Maya Grove is an international lawyer based in the Hague and is governor of the Climate Governance Commission, which seeks to propose high-impact global governance innovations adequate to meet the climate challenge. She serves as co-chair of the Coordinating Committee for the International Anti-Corruption Court, EICC, as well as on the Canadian Task Force Against Global Corruption. As a principal legal officer, she has previously worked on the development and administration of multilateral treaties, and she was a co-winner of a major international prize in 2018 on Global Governance Innovation New Shape Prize, and co-authored in 2020 the book Global Governance and the Emergency of Global Institutions for 21st Century. Please give applause to Maya Grove.
Perfect. Go ahead. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much to Paulo, Common Home for Humanity, and this very, very interesting work for inviting us here to have this discussion. Excellent to be with you today, and also the extraordinary work you're doing with Portuguese-speaking countries. It's really inspiring. So I'll share a few thoughts from the vantage point of the Climate Governance Commission and the work that we're up to complement Paulo's very, very interesting proposals. And we've also featured the work of Common Home for Humanity in our most recent report. So to frame our current situation, reflections on COP28 thus far, I won't spend much time on this slide. No doubt many of you will have been watching developments. There's some interesting movement on financing, bit of movement on loss and damage, some good steps, US-China cooperation, and some non-binding statements, declarations, some of which could be impactful. So we'll see what comes out of COP28, but we know that likely it will not fill the gap. It will not get us on the path to really making the 1.5 degree target as anticipated in the Paris Agreement. And as we saw from UNEP just before COP started, we're on track for catastrophic climate change if unconditional commitments by countries are implemented. We're on track to 2.9 degrees global warming, and that is truly catastrophic. And there's uncertainty now if even 1.5 degrees is safe. And indeed, even with the current temperature rise that we have now, some populations around the world already very much suffering and reach the limits of their adaptive capacity for these changes already. So, and we just saw this new report that the planet is on the brink of 5 catastrophic climate tipping points. So we have big challenges. And it's our view at the Climate Governance Commission that we need to think in different ways to meet these challenges. And one of those ways that we need to think differently is we need to absolutely validate the Paris Agreement, UNFCCC processes, support them, try to turbocharge and make sure they're absolutely as successful as possible, but also buttress them, support them. We need this rapid and unprecedented global transformation in the global economy that has no documented historic precedent. So we're really in uncharted territory. And we have to, the Commission, we've really been thinking about what are the root causes that has gotten us to this point. And one of those we think really is our weak governance, at all levels of governance, but also at the international. We have to think about our next generation governance mechanisms as part of our crisis planning and preparedness planning. So as Paulo noted, and why this Earth systems approach is so vital, so important, the planetary boundaries, which is very complementary, it's interdependent with that amazing graphic that Paulo showed about the hardware and software of the whole Earth system, where if you look at the planetary boundaries, we've now, of course, overstepped 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. And for climate, yes, we've overstepped it already, but you see we're in the red for others that are really vital, crucial to stabilize and restabilize our climate system. So basically what we're going to need to do is shift to global governance models for all of the planetary boundaries, all of the Earth system as just a practical necessity. And Paulo also showed the slide about the probable overshoot. We will probably overshoot, even in the best case scenario in terms of action. We will likely overshoot by about 2035. We'll have to draw down the carbon in the atmosphere. So this cleaning is unbelievably important, and we'll need new governance for that. We'll need new institutions. So this is so important to start thinking about very seriously as sort of if we want to see competent governance for the well-being of all. So in the Commission, we've convened a group of really wonderful, extraordinary experts, thought leaders, former heads of state like Mary Robinson, who also chairs the Elders, founded by Nelson Mandela. Johan Rockström is our scientific co-chair. The wonderful Maria Fernanda Espinosa is also one of our co-chairs. We have amazing experts from China, from the MENA region, small island states, etc. So really a cross-section of humanity, trying to put our heads together to really think about what could be this thought leadership for next generation governance. So we released a report on November 28th. Richard, maybe you can hold up a copy of the report. It's available online. And what we've done in the report is made a top 10 urgent near-term proposals for strengthening our current governance system, and then 5 next-generation governance innovation proposals. And the near term, we say between 1 and 3 years, and medium term 3 to 5, because we feel the situation is indeed, according to the scientists, according to the best science, the most authoritative science, it is truly an emergency. We have such a limited time to bend the curve. So these are a few of our top 10 near-term, or all of them, proposals. You can find out more detail in the report. I won't dwell on them, but one is, trying to make the COPs more fit for purpose, focus on implementation and accountability, and then you'll see a whole host of others. And we have amazing partners through nearly all of these to really work and refine and move these forward. But then coming to Paulo's proposals and those of Common Home of Humanity, what is the next generation institutional architecture that we're very, very likely going to need? So, for example, a global environment agency, which scientists have been calling for years, to defragment the international system, to connect the dots between the planetary boundaries, knowledge and management, more accountability, international legal mechanism. Then 3, which I think is most relevant and where we mention the Common Home for Humanity proposal, is adapt environmental law, international environmental law in particular, to the Anthropocene. We are in uncharted waters in terms of where we're at now in the Earth system, and we need to look really, really carefully at our legal paradigms, what we need to indeed properly manage the Earth system. So there should be some high-level, really top-notch working groups, legal working groups, either within the ILC or without, maybe with the Hague Academy of International Law, et cetera, to really start to practically develop these new legal paradigms. We think that's absolutely vital and important. So last, just to finish off, these big global governance reforms seem quite remote and distant, but there have been these very, very transformative smart coalitions of global civil society, like-minded states, that have driven through very profound international changes. That's why your work with the Portuguese-speaking countries is so important. We're also working on communications, education, so citizens understand really what's going on. And we'll be working at major summits and events that are coming up, Paris+10. We hope to work with you closely and prepare for that, so we can really offer some very sound solutions of excellence to the international community. So just to close, really we feel like we are at a transition point. As an international community, the Secretary General has said, we're at a crossroads in human history, a challenge that we haven't faced since the Second World War. I would say this is a more profound challenge than the Second World War. Complex, scientific kind of dimensions that we really need around, and then figure out the law and governance that can help us manage what we'll need to manage. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you very much. So we had the legal dimension and also a governance dimension. Maya already did the homework, so I will suggest that we'll go all together to the plenary and present the solution. And maybe so. Well, I will introduce now the next speaker, Tiago Piti Cunha. He is currently Executive Director of the Oceano Azul Foundation. He was an advisor to the President of the Portuguese Republic on Environmental Strategic Commission of the Oceans between 1997 and 2000. two in the last century. He was a counselor at the permanent mission of Portugal to the United Nations, responsible for ocean affairs, and represented the EU at the United Nations General Assembly on oceans affairs during the Portuguese and French EU presidencies in 2000. He was honored with the PSOA Prize 2022 and 21, and in 2016 he was awarded the European Citizens Prize by the European Parliament for its actions dedicated to promotion ocean governance at the United Nations and in the European Union. So, give an applause to Tiago Pita e Cunha. Só para ter aqui.
Thank you very much for such a long but generous introduction, George. Well, I'm here to speak about the ocean. You've seen my CV. I've been working on ocean policies for most of my life, but I'm here as well to congratulate the common home of humanity, because, and you in particular, Paulo, because I've been a witness of the persistence, the coherence, the resilience that this organization is having on really giving us the understanding that we are really living in the Earth system. And also I have to say that I'm here also to not only to show the solidarity from the ocean point of view, but also to benefit from your understanding, because I think we share very much your position in what relates the understanding of a system. I was very jealous with your picture there about the airspace and the atmosphere and the differences that through a picture we can see of what they are, because that is exactly what happens with the ocean as well. The ocean is looked at by decision makers as a space. And as a space, it is regulated by what we call the Constitution of the Ocean, which is the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention. But as a space, we like spaces because they are unidimensional. They have one dimension. Then we can divide them. And then we can subdivide what we divide. And that's why we don't have one ocean in accordance with the space notion of ocean, but we have 5 oceans. The Atlantic, the Indian, the Pacific, the Antarctic, and the Arctic Ocean. And this is exactly what we should kind of avoid. We need to avoid this kind of understanding and reasoning. This is what's great for the 19th century, or maybe for part of the 20th century. But it's completely outdated now that we, because of science, understand how everything is connected. And the ocean is nothing more than a biochemical complex phenomenon. Much more complex actually than the atmosphere. Much less science also to understand what goes on in the ocean. And because of that, we struggle to make decision makers understand how important it is if you want to start addressing the problem through this systemic approach, the system approach, how the process that we now have to face the different challenges need really to start integrating with each other, at least through crossing with each other. And this is why we come, and the Oceano Azul Foundation, we have been supporters of the Ocean Action Day at Climate COPs. We support the group of Ocean Climate Friends at COPs, because we really understand that you are not going to solve the climate problem without solving the ocean problem. At the same time, I understand and I realize that the ocean is not a major player at all in the climate COPs or in the climate deliberations. The ocean is actually quite a smaller player. And this is why we are so interested as well in connecting the dots between the different UN processes. It's very important that what is happening in other processes reflects, but it's also very important that the climate issues goes out of COP and is also reflected, for instance, in ocean conferences. Because we understand that for the ocean point of view, it's easier to speak of climate in an ocean conference than to speak on ocean in a climate conference. And so what do we expect? We are very much hoping that the next UN Ocean Conference in Nice, in France, will be able to give us a turning point in terms of ocean action. That's something that is of great consideration for us. Despite the fact that climate action is probably not addressing the stock issues that reservoir the main engines for this home to function. And again, thank you very much, and I look forward to learn a lot with our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiago. Now I would like to invite Joshua Lincoln. Joshua Lincoln is currently a senior fellow at the Center of International Law and Governance at Fletcher, the Graduate School of Global Affairs to Tufts University. He is executive board member of the Global Governance Forum and advisory board of the Cambrian Futures Group. He also serves as an advisor to governments, companies, and organizations, drawing on 25 years of experience across four continents with United Nations, non-governmental organizations, academia, and civil society. Please give an applause to welcome the Joshua Lincoln. Yes, I will help you.
Thank you. I'll just use this. Obrigado, Jorge. Obrigado, Pablo. And since we're in the UAE, salam alaikum wa marhaba likullam. So, very important to remember where we are. I wanted to use some of the work that I've been doing on the Plastics Treaty as an illustration of some of the concepts that I think are at the home of the plan of action that Paulo has outlined. And in fact, it flows very nicely then from the proposals of the Climate Governance Commission and some of the points that were just made on the oceans. So with your permission, this is a test case to think through some of the concepts that Paulo was talking about. Because verbal communication is a challenge, we are going to use images as well to help guide that. I thought I used this. This is one of the quotes in Paulo's performance, in Paulo's document. Very interesting quote about flow versus stock. And this issue, this basic distinction, is going to come up in the context of the Global Plastics Treaty process. Plastics are the subject currently of a 3-year negotiation for the first ever Global Plastics Treaty. Round 3 of those negotiations was just now in Nairobi last month. And it's a process that, intergovernmental process that should end by the end of 2024, mid-2025. So it also relates to the 10 framework in a way, and is very much tied to it. Plastics. The life cycle of plastics, as you know, the mandate for negotiation was what's called the full life cycle of plastics. It was everything from extraction all the way down to the end of the life cycle of plastics. And this doesn't bear any detail with an audience as informed as this, but obviously plastics are quite central to the whole system of the planetary interactions that we have. The illustrations of this, I will not spend any amount of time on this, but everything from the oceans, you see the turtle, that is a separate problem. That's not oceans, that's legacy plastic. That's a separate problem. Talk about stocks. That's stock. That's the existing plastic in the ocean that is negatively affecting wildlife. You also have pictures on there about the effect of plastics on land. I think that was next door, I hope. Plastics on land, plastics emanating from tires into the air, nanoplastics, microplastics, and the way they are moving their way into now babies are being born with microplastics in their bodies at birth, coming from the mothers who have eaten the fish, who have inhaled the plastic or assimilated the plastic in the oceans. And you see the range of the problem. There's a temptation sometimes to think of plastics as a narrow technical issue, but in some ways, plastics are fundamental to human progress, and they will continue to be. They have been an engine, they're fundamental material. If you think about the built world, it's stone, it's cement, it's steel, it's plastic, and it's wood. Everything is one of those 5 materials, fundamentally. I do not suggest you have surgery without plastics. Today we are driving plastics, we are flying in plastics. They have many uses, but they present a huge set of systemic challenges as well. This is a report by some of my colleagues at Boston College and elsewhere looking at growing research on the global systemic health implications of plastic and the way they present differently at different stages of the life cycle of plastic. And economists are now beginning to attach numbers to this, to the health implications at various stages of the life cycle. So interestingly, the process of intergovernmental negotiation has pushed the science to do far more research and to produce far more scientific data in the lead up to the negotiations than was ever available before. The sheer number of reports in the last 2 years that are seeking to deepen our understanding of this phenomenon and its systemic implications is considerable, dwarfs what existed before then. There are 2 aspects to this that are perhaps of interest. The first is chemicals of concern. About 13,000 chemicals go into plastics. Of those, 6,000 are thought to be benign, 3,000 are confirmed as harmful, and another 3,000 are probably harmful. To give you an example, the little pie chart on the right with 138 are the 138 chemicals that are currently named in existing conventions. So we have 138 in conventions and 3,000 not yet under treaty, shall we say. So the scale of the pollution challenge from a chemical standpoint is enormous. The second aspect to this treaty is that it's also about oil, because 99% of plastic is fossil fuel derived. The feedstock for plastic is oil, overwhelmingly today. And so the connection between the agenda that gathered us here and the agenda of the plastic much connected in that respect, and that behavior, if I may say, is also playing itself out in the negotiations and in the positions of the parties. It will not surprise you that, particularly because most oil-producing states who have seen the switch to renewables come, have planned for their future profitability to move into basically their petrochemical industries and plastics in particular. So the notion that now we might regulate plastics presents a fundamental challenge to the bottom line of essentially what was their insurance plan with respect to energy. The challenge for us is that plastics production is on the rise. This is in percentage based by region, and then over there you see the global trend through the next 30 years. This at a time, if I go back to this was the previous slide that was basically saying that for us to meet the 1.5 degree goal on warming, we need a 46% reduction in current plastic production based on 2019 numbers. If you go forward, this is the anticipated course of plastics. I think a 400% increase between now and 2060. So something fundamental needs to be resolved here, though there's no way, there is no universe where those two things come to be reconciled. It will not, following on what I was just saying about polymer production, about oil states and oil industries and petrochemical industries, it will not surprise you that the people who own the product, and who finance and who derive benefit from primary plastic production are oil states and oil companies in that sense. And that has informed a lot of the positions on the negotiations that are ongoing as we speak. This is then a very interesting thought. We move from the production of plastics to who generates single-use plastic waste. And we then get into some of the differences. My own country, the United States, being egregious in all counts, both at the level of total production of single-use plastic waste and per capita. This is the two sides of the equation. But you will see Australia, overall a small number, but per capita a very significant number, number 1 out of 20. I compare it to the bottom, India, which is still in the top 20 in terms of overall, but on a per capita basis, obviously much, much smaller. This is just to illustrate the range of circumstances that attend different countries and how they are trying to live and tackle this particular challenge. Another aspect of this treaty, which also relates to the agenda here, is how it impacts vulnerable populations and the whole idea of a just transition. There are sort of two realms. The first is this affects what are called waste pickers, plastic waste pickers. They refer to themselves increasingly as the green force. 20 million people globally who derive a living from the processing of plastic waste, and their direct livelihoods being affected by whatever we choose to do as a global community about this. Above and beyond that, you have the hundreds of millions of people in the communities that are adjacent to the different parts of the life cycle of plastic, whether it is extraction, production of the plastic, recycling of the plastic. In every case, there are side effects on the communities that neighbor those particular parts of the process. This is just to mention some of the things I already mentioned: state actors, some of the geopolitics affecting the negotiations, non-state actors. Interestingly, the private sector feels quite differently, whether you're talking to a brand or you're talking to a petrochemical. They take different positions. There is no such thing as a universal position of business on this particular thing. We have seen this in the negotiations process as well. The just transition issues I just mentioned, and the fact that this process is then connected, the plastics treaty process is connected to the COP process as well, but also a number of the pre-existing pollution treaties and some of the new emerging efforts, for example, on a fossil fuel treaty and things of that nature. This is the zero draft that was put forward last month in Nairobi. The process is full of frustration. There are very different understandings among major nation states about the direction of this to go. A lot of it breaks down to this question of flows versus stocks. And one of the big disagreements right now is whether or not the treaty should include the production of primary plastic flow in the treaty. The future production of primary plastic, or whether the treaty should restrict itself to stock issues, which is essentially how to deal with existing problems of plastic in the water, in the environment, and so on. So the way in which these two sets of issues are dealt with, there's not a lot of precedent for it, and a lot of the delegations and a lot of the civil society are struggling with how to deal comprehensively with these issues at scale. This is flow and stock issues. And as they present themselves, this tension between the pollution agenda that I mentioned and the decarbonization agenda that I mentioned, the notion of voluntary versus obligatory approaches. We are here in the home of the voluntary approach, the Paris Agreement. Many of us have problems with that 8 years out, and we, I think, are living through this process. And the big question is, what should be the correct balance of obligations, core obligations, versus, let's call it, national plans, ideally in a treaty that deals with these two sets of issues. Thank you. That's where I ended. Thank you.
Thank you, Giorgio. And we are lack of time, but we will try to have all the discussion also. And now I have very honored to introduce Maria Fernanda Espinosa. In fact, it's no requirement to make the presentation of Maria Espinosa unless saying that is from the Ecuador. So it's an Ecuadorian. And is also executive director of GWL Voices for Change and Inclusion. I have one page of the short bio of Maria Espinosa, but of course, Mrs. Maria Espinosa also asked me not to give so big introduction. So everyone knows also the president of the 73rd session of United Nations General Assembly. Please take the floor. I would like also to invite Portuguese ambassador to take a seat. Okay, thank you. Mr. Maria Espinosa, thank you.
Well, it is true that I said, please do not read my CV. Well, and I actually did my homework. I have like 3 or 4 pages of notes to speak, but I am going to completely change the script and basically share with you 3 main ideas. And I've been following the work of Common Home of Humanity, of Paolo and his team, and I strongly believe that they are conceptually, intellectually, one step ahead always. And basically, what Paolo just the importance of combining the stock and the flows of carbon is actually the future. It's been calling, and the Common Home of Humanity has been calling for a long time, is when we negotiate climate, we need to redefine the subject matter. That's what he's asking us for. And how to define the subject matter is that climate is not a self-contained category, tangible category. What he's been telling us is that when we negotiate climate, it is about an Earth system approach. It is about looking at the planetary boundaries and looking at a stable climate as part of our common heritage. That's what the Common Home of Humanity has been saying. And that, of course, makes a lot of sense for the conversations we're having here at COP. The issue is a stable climate being a common heritage of humankind conceptually makes all the sense. The challenge I see is how to translate this very innovative conceptual approach to the normative policy and negotiation space. And that, I think, is, Paolo, the challenge. Because I've been following closely the negotiations here at COP28. Basically, what we are discussing is not climate only. We are negotiating how is that we collectively use the atmospheric space. Because the atmospheric space is limited. It's not unlimited. And what we are discussing is not only how we use the atmospheric space in the future, but how we have used the atmospheric space in the past. And how to come to grips for greater climate justice. In the discussion we're having on the global stocktake and on the orderly, fair and just transition and on the mitigation commitments and the adaptation, low funding and low attention, is how we make justice to the historical use of the atmospheric space. So this is, in my opinion, the key of the overall discussion. Again, the problem is when you say that a stable climate is a common heritage of humankind that we will leave to the future generations. No, we are saying, how is that we make sure that we do not go over the very material boundaries of the atmosphere. So the discussion is extremely complicated. It doesn't translate in the line-by-line negotiations that are taking place. And the challenge is, again, how we bring this conceptual wealth to the table of the negotiation and to the decision makers. How we redefine the subject matter, how we redefine the concept of climate justice. What does it mean? And what does it mean to ask developing countries to raise their ambition when there are terrible flaws on the means of implementation? So at the end of the day, what are the development pathways that we are, collectively building? What are the policy and political decisions that we're taking as we speak? And number three, how is that we are connecting the climate negotiation of the use of the atmospheric space, but how we are connecting this discussion with the other planetary crises that we're facing. You mentioned the importance of bringing the oceans discussion to the table. For the first time ever, water was factored in the agenda of COP. This is unbelievable. We cannot solve the climate crisis without water. And the water cycle is also a common good, and we haven't been able to come to grips to really do this, I would say semantic quantum leap to understand that that's exactly what it's on stake. And it's very simple. We know that 25% of the emissions are absorbed by land and by the ecosystems, the land ecosystem. And the other 25 are absorbed by our oceans. And the other 50% goes to the atmosphere. So, and here I don't want to speak as a geographer, but more looking at the political implications of all of this. First of all, I think that this idea of not only looking at the flaws, but looking at the stock is extremely important, Paulo and Common Home of Humanity. We only need to do a little bit of homework on how to translate that into meaningful language for the negotiations, which I don't have the answer, but you are the intelligent ones, you know how to do that translation. The number two issue is how to redefine climate justice when you think that a stable climate is a common heritage without falling into the tragedy of the commons. It's everybody's and nobody's responsibility. The cleaning up of the past, as you are very well, saying. And number three, how we connect this whole new conceptual approach to climate justice and climate as a subject matter to the other intergovernmental negotiation dynamics and into the implementation of the environmental multilateral agreements. There are plenty of them. I forget every time I say 2000 and they say, no, it's 2,500, etc. Well, but how is that we connect this conversation with the overall planetary crisis that we are experiencing? What is experiencing? What is the Earth system approach that is needed that will translate into policy, into norm setting, and into political negotiations? This is not, an easy fix. I'm very happy that you're also working with the Lusophone countries, that we're going to have COP30 in Brazil, that I think that there is momentum to install these conceptual contributions to the negotiators in the table. I've been a climate negotiator myself and, for many, many years, and I wish we would have had this kind of, input and intelligence when we were taking decisions. As we stand now, I really, really hope that the phasing out fossil fuel language will remain both in the global stocktake document, on the mitigation document, and more importantly, that we will collectively decide on what is the roadmap to ensure that this phasing out of fossil fuels will translate into ambition matching, resources, low carbon technology transfer, and capacity for the developing countries. It's what we call, climate justice. So thank you again to Common Home of Humanity for contributing, this extremely important piece of intellect and knowledge. And I really look forward to continue to working with you, to have all the enlightenment from your thinking and your contributions, and translate into the very boring world of politicians and negotiators. So once again, thank you. I didn't read my statement, but I was extremely excited about what you have brought to us today. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Fernanda Espinosa, and of course we also thank you a lot to be with us, not only in this panel, but during all the process. So we will take a time for a short debate because we are out of time, and I'll try. Someone already say me that we have only 5 minutes, but I will try to achieve that. So once I have a lot of questions, but once that we have one from audience, I will give the priority to Ana. Please.
Okay, thank you for all these presentations, all very interesting one. I'm Ana Barreira, Director of the International Institute for Law and the Environment. My question is first for Maya, another for Paulo. Maya, you were proposing a set of actions for improving climate governance, and one was the creation, the establishment of an environmental global agency. So why do you think, because this was already in the agenda of Rio, it was a proposal by the president of Germany, and also it came in Rio +20, and always has been this idea on the table to to turn the UNEP from a program to an agency. So why do you think now this will work? Because this has been a long-term issue on the negotiating table, and also with the International Environmental Court, like there is this idea of reforming the statute of the International Court of Justice to create the ecocide as well, and it's so slow. So how, do you see that the world is now prepared for this? As it has been said just by Maria Fernanda, how difficult negotiations are. So do you think, or what elements have changed in the past 30 years? And for Paulo, you are talking about cleaning up as part of the solution, but and I'm thinking on the technological options for cleaning up, like for example, carbon capture and storage, or like for example, of course, nature-based solutions. But there is a lot of opposition to carbon capture. So from a practical point of view, how can we do it? And also, I'm concerned about capturing a lot from nature, because then if there is any fire or someone starts with just deforestation, as it has been happening in the Amazon, then there is a lot of release of CO2. So it's not only emissions from economic activities, but also the releases of CO2 that happens when there are fires, deforestation. So what solutions do you see from a technical point of view? Thank you.
Thanks very much for those excellent questions, really excellent. And firstly, we've been working to set up a smart coalition for improved global environmental governance. It's called the Mobilizing Earth Governance Alliance. It's already been soft launched. It will be officially launched in January, and it's meant to advocate for the proposals in the Climate Governance Commission report, primarily, including the Global Environment Agency. So I think, from my perspective, the Global Environment Agency may be an idea whose time has come. We have seen similar patterns, for example, with the International Criminal Court, which is mentioned in the Genocide Convention of 1947, for example, but then wasn't adopted in the Rome Statute until the 90s. So some of these very big institutional changes take time to see the ideas in the international community, and there has not been a very well-organized smart coalition campaign for a global environment agency. So we can speak more afterwards about some of the actors who are very influential, who might be able to get involved. But I think the very focused campaigning smart coalition approach could be extremely transformational in terms of really making those next steps, given the gravity of the planetary science. It is so unbelievably grave. And just to mention ecocide, and ecocide is it's proposed to be at the International Criminal Court. federal court. And it's been remarkably successful, that campaign, and to have some states that are supporting, but it's the amendment procedures under the Rome Statute are so difficult. I mean, it was intentionally in the drafting. So, it might even be easier to establish a new agency than to amend the statute. And so we're going to be working with partners, but I feel like, again, it could be just something that's so rational. Heads of state have argued for it, but we need the mobilization with civil society, with business, that say we can't do business on a dead planet. We have to have proper global environmental management.
Okay, let's answer very shortly. The main problem, the technical problem, is to restore nature is not enough. We will have more and more problem to restore nature. It will be more and more difficult with more risk. Of course, climate change, we can plant trees and after we have a drought and after we have a flood and your effort goes down. So, but we need to restore nature, it's inevitable. The question is, for what? How we account for the phenomenon that is happening in the US with the carbon capture technology is only to give rights to new emissions. If we start also to use the capture technology to start clean the atmosphere, what is behind? What are the political consequences of this in terms of negotiations? They're not saying we are starting to clean our responsibility. This will change the negotiations in the COP and start to restore the nature in the South. The question of technology is we need a regulation for that system. What are the technologies that are accepted and the others that are not accepted? Every option have their own problems. We are in an emergency situation. We need to use the best knowledge and the best technologies we have to clean. If nature-based solutions are enough, it will be amazing, but probably it will not be enough. So, if it's not enough, what are the technologies that are accepted? We need to define this. And after, to use these technologies, not to make new emissions, to put credits in the market, but to clean what is behind. And this will change the game. It will change the game in the negotiations in terms of climate justice. So the things are connected. We are starting to clean what we have made. So let's talk about restore the ecosystems that we have also. We need both, because the CO2, if the CO2 is in place, it's not enough to have a stable climate.
So we have more minutes to have the debate. So I will ask very briefly also for Maria Espinosa, but for Joshua and Tiago. And but I will start with Fernanda Espinosa. I saw an interview to the Global Governance that you made. One of the issue that you talked about, it was the necessary of the system accountability that can measure, as you said. So besides this legal framework, besides this all the governance architecture that we have to accountability could be necessary, plus this all this idea.
Well, I think that this is not only, I don't recall exactly what I said, but I have to say that the issue of the whole multilateral system is in an implementation crisis. And we need to be better equipped for accountability, for transparency, for oversight. In the environmental front, that's one of the greatest challenges. And the climate that I have the privilege to co-chair, as Maya mentioned, is precisely proposing a series of ideas on how to improve accountability and issues of liability and legal liability. We have seen excellent examples for litigation. So how to use these examples for environmental litigation and for greater, as I said, accountability and better implementation. The issue, I think that Josh mentioned, the issue of binding, not binding. For me, quite honestly, and perhaps Maya would say, "Ooh, terrible what she's saying," but the issue of binding, not binding, it's really not the most relevant. The Paris Agreement, some people say, it's really not binding. Yes, the Paris Agreement is an instrument that was agreed by 196 member states, and it needs to be complied with. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And one of the other issues that we are proposing in the report is how to upscale and mainstream and make COPs, more effective on the implementation and accountability front. So I think that that's a challenge for the entire multilateral system, but for the environment, I think it's perhaps, as important as in other fronts like human rights, the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. So I think that there's a long, long, long way to go.
And we hope also that this could contribute to the Summit of the Future Pact. Yes, thank you. So, Tiago, very briefly also, this means that we should also take another social and economic to make these investments, maintenance, and get all the material finance to make the restoration and to make the maintenance of the ocean?
Well, the way we look at it, one of the methods that the ocean is going to be a key player on the decarbonization, and not only because of the sake of the ocean, but because of the sake of the whole of the planet. We normally economic-based solutions and nature-based solutions. The ocean is going to be very important because it's going to be able to contribute to economic-based solutions for decarbonization. A lot of times we think about decarbonization through the emissions and through, therefore, the energy sector. But we know the ocean is an important part. The European Union thinks that we will have more gigawatts of offshore renewable energy than onshore renewable energy. 30. Of course, Europe makes a large effort in developing offshore renewable energy. To give an example, Portugal now has this incredible program of getting to 10 gigawatts of offshore renewable energy. So things are happening on the ground. So clean energy from the ocean is clearly going to be part of the energy mix. That's one. Transportation is a second one. We will not be able to live without the shipping industry. 80 to 90% of our trade goes by sea. So we need to decarb, but we cannot get rid of vessels and boats, so we need green shipping. So shipping is one of the biggest lacunae in all these COP deliberations, is the ship emissions. And this is something that needs to be addressed as well, so that shipping can become part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And then you have food. That's very important too. We can produce a lot more food through innovative aquaculture and through the new innovative biotechnology from the ocean, instead of overfishing and instead of reducing the biomass, because reducing the biomass increases decarbonization, because it doesn't allow so much of that carbon to be stored and absorbed by the ocean. But if we develop other foods like algae and bivalves, they actually carbon from the waters, and we can create a cycle from water to land, which actually is something that the ocean would need a lot. So these are kind of economic solutions that are important. But then you have the nature-based solutions. And I don't want to monopolize much more the conversation, but we've been talking mostly on blue carbon, speaking on those small coastal ecosystems like mangroves and seagrass beds. But we really need to look much more into the overall biomass of the ocean and the sediments and the seabed. And of course, this brings us then to connect with other processes like the fishery subsidies in WTO or the seabed mining and the International Seabed Authority, because they would both make impossible that we would have gains on a nature-based solution that would be resting upon sediments, seabed, biomass.
Okay, thank you, Tiago. And the last question to Joshua. We saw in your presentation also beside we also have to depollute. So this means that we have go ahead of negative boundaries and negative limits and pass to the positive actions to measure also these positive limits and boundaries, as Tiago already demonstrated also.
Yes, I will answer this very briefly because the audience has been very patient. I think part of the challenge when you think about plastics is to clean up the stock, to use Paulo's expression, the stock of plastic that already exists, and it exists everywhere, far more than we are aware. And at the same time, to think about how to limit the flow of future plastic, principally because that's how you get back to reducing the stock. It would be silly to invest too much effort in cleaning up existing legacy plastic while, as they say, leaving the tap on to a 400% increase. If you think there's a lot of plastic in the universe today, I suggest you wait 20 years of additional plastic to see what the effect will be. So this linkage between the two issues, I think, was what was most compelling to me, is the notion that you cannot think about flow without thinking about stock. You're in trouble if you don't have the legal framework to do it, hence the need for creativity, but you have to think about the two as related. In the plastics treaty, we're seeing an effort to separate the two. There are some people who only want to talk about pollution cleanup, essentially make it a recycling or a waste management treaty. And there's another group of states that want to make the conversation to include what they call upstream part of the cycle, which is the production of primary plastic in the future. And that, in many ways, is fundamentally a COP28 or a COP issue in so many ways. And if I had one message on this, it is that the policies across these issues have to get further integrated, because some of the same country delegations are behaving differently over there from over here. and their own policies themselves are not integrated across these two areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And I'll ask you, all the audience, a round of applause to all our speakers. And of course, thank a lot for your passion. And I would like also to thank to the Portuguese government to stay in here in the Portugal pavilion. Besides that, Portugal already have in the basis law of climate, the climate heritage to be discussed and to go forward. So I think that we have already, with this discussion, the legal framework, the governance tools, also the tools to implement all this new idea that we have to implement of the cleaning up the atmosphere. And also, as Maria Espinosa said in the intervention, we have to convince of all the policymakers here in COP, and maybe, who knows, in the COP30 in Brazil, you get our recognition of the climate system.